You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode, we're reviewing the T20 Series between Scotland and Australia. And as expected, Australia dominated over the three games to win 3-0 in the T20 Series against Scotland. And it was a very strong, dominant performance by an Australian T20 team that is starting to look towards the future and starting to plan ahead for the next T20 World Cup in a couple of years' time. On the other hand, Scotland showed glimpses of what they can do when they play at their best. But throughout the series, they couldn't capitalize on key opportunities with the bat and the ball. And that's what pretty much cost them the series win and also trying to win a game in this T20 series against Australia. But apart from the on-the-field stuff, the off-the-field stuff was great. We saw some great crowds at the Grange venue in Edinburgh. Everyone enjoyed their time. Both teams really embraced the series. Both teams really embraced the culture that Edinburgh has to offer. And it was a great family cricketing atmosphere. And I think everyone watching at the ground and everyone watching from afar certainly felt that vibe as the series was being played between Scotland and Australia. So it was a great series, despite the home team not quite getting the result they would have wanted. But at least the crowd saw an Australian team, some of the world's best batters and bowlers go about their business. They got their money's worth, that's for sure. So as I said, we're going to be reviewing the series, talking about how Scotland and Australia went about things in the series, and talk about how they went overall in the series. So there's plenty to talk about and discuss, so let's get into it. But first of all, before we do that, let's have a look at the results from this T20 series between Scotland and Australia, and have a look at how each game panned out in terms of results. So all three games of the series were played at the Grange Cricket Club ground in Edinburgh. And the first T20, Australia won by 7 wickets. Travis Head was named player of the match. The second T20, Australia won by 70 runs. Player of the match was Josh Inglis. And the third and final game of the series, Australia won by 6 wickets. Cameron Green was named player of the match, and Australia went on to win the series 3-0, which was a very convincing, dominant series performance and victory by the Australian team. So that's how each of the three games panned out across this T20 series against Scotland and Australia. Now, let's talk about how both Scotland and Australia went about their business in this T20 series with both bat and ball, and also overall on a team perspective as well. So let's start with the home side. Let's talk about Scotland's performance with bat and ball throughout the series, but also as a team performance as well. And let's have a look at the batting stats, first of all, in terms of the run scorers. McMullen, 134, Munsey, 72, Berrington, 36, Cross, 34, Leask, 27, Hares, 18, and Jones with 1. So that's the batting stats from Scotland in the series. Let's have a look at the bowling stats. 5 wickets for Curry, 2 each for Sol and Watt, a wicket each for Jarvis and McMullen, and no wickets for Castle, Davidson, Greaves, Sharif, and Ruil. And that's how the Scotland bowlers performed in the series against Australia. It was a big opportunity for Scotland to test themselves against Australia in these 3 T20s. A real opportunity to play against the best teams in the world, but also to see where they're at in terms of their cricket development and where they're at as a cricket team and what needs to be done to get better, to get to the level of Australia. Now, obviously, 3-0 series loss is a reflection that the skill gap is quite big between the two sides. That's quite evident in the associate world. But the more opportunities that Scotland have by playing Australia, playing other well-ranked teams, is that the more they'll have these experiences, the more better they will be in the long run. And that's very important for any associate nation's development. And no doubt in this series, Scotland will be disappointed. They didn't quite show us the type of team they were at the T20 World Cup when they played against Australia at that game, when they scored 180, when they dominated against England, when they batted first and made 90 for none when the rain came in. We didn't quite see that in this series against Australia. So they'll be disappointed about that. They didn't quite execute their skills with bat and ball, and they just fell below the mark at times. So let's have a look at the 3 games for Scotland and how they went about things in each of the 3 games. We'll start with game 1. In the first T20, Scotland batted first and made 9 for 154 batting first in game number 1. Now, 150 odd ain't going to really challenge the type of quality that Australia have with their batting. So for Scotland, 154 runs on the board wasn't quite enough in the end. And as we know, what happened in the run chase, Travis Head made a quick fire 80 off 25 balls. You know, the equal fastest half century for T20 cricket for Australia, 17 balls. And Australia chased down the total within 9.4 overs and recorded the highest ever power play score in T20 internationals with 113. So it just showed you that it wasn't enough from Scotland. Their batters got in, got out, got starts. They lost wickets at regular intervals throughout the innings in that first game. The bowlers in the first game as well struggled. They had no answers to Travis Head and Mitchell Marsh and co. Just put to the sword, really, and didn't know what to do with the ball and sort of got lost and, you know, felt that pressure and, you know, they were on the back foot and that's what happened. So, yeah, disappointing first game for Scotland. The second game, they were chasing 197, which Australia set for them. It was always going to be tough for Scotland in that run chase, even though we know at this venue at the Grange, it gets better and better to bat on as the game progresses. But when you're chasing nearly 200, it's always difficult in T20 cricket anyway, because you've got a required run rate that's around about 10 plus and over. If you don't hit early boundaries, you don't capitalize the power play, you're not going to chase down the runs. And that's what happened with Scotland. Just like in game 1, they struggled again with the bat. They were bowled out for 126 and 16.4 overs. And just like in game 1, the batters didn't get going at all, lost their wickets. They were on track, and then they lost a wicket. They were forming partnerships, then lost a wicket. And all that momentum was taken out of the innings, really. There were only 2 batters that made double figures in the second game with the bat for Scotland. That was McMullen with 59 and George Munsey with 19. The rest of them struggled greatly. Brandon McMullen, his innings of 59 gave Scotland some hope. As long as McMullen was there, Scotland did have a chance of chasing down the runs, be it a slight chance, a slim chance, I should say. They had an opportunity to do it. But as soon as he went, that was the end of Scotland's chances. Just like in game 1 again, the bowlers struggled, mainly to Josh Inglis. And as we know, Josh Inglis went and scored a very superb 103 or 49. The Scotland bowlers again struggled, went for runs, leaked runs, didn't quite execute their skills and plans, and just struggled against the batting power of Australia yet again. And in the third and final game of the series, they were batting first again, made 9 for 149. Batting first was not enough, was well below par. Australia chased down the runs easily again. And the same story, just like in the previous games, batters got in, got out, got starts, didn't form partnerships, lost wickets at crucial times, which cost them. Yet again, Brandon McMullen was the standout, scoring another 50. His second one for the series, those are 3 against Australia in total. He scored a 50 in that T20 World Cup match between Australia and Scotland back in St. Lucia in 2024 this year, when the T20 World Cup was on. So he was the only standout with the bat, really. Everyone else struggled again. And the bowlers struggled to defend 150. Pretty much not enough runs on the board. When you're defending 150, you need to take wickets early. They did that, but then Australia formed partnerships and they got back on track to chase down the runs, all thanks to Cameron Green's innings of 62 not out. And then the bowlers struggled, and just like they did in game 1 and 2. So that's pretty much the story of Scotland throughout this whole entire series. Their batting didn't quite hit the mark. Their bowling didn't quite hit the mark. And they will be very disappointed about that. But as I said earlier, they showed glimpses, Scotland, of what they can do. We saw at times in this series glimpses of what they can do when they play at their best. We saw that from a batting perspective with Brandon McMullen. Clearly, he was Scotland's best batter in the series. He scored 2 half-centuries. And he loves playing against Australia. 3 half-centuries against them now. As I mentioned before, going back to the T20 World Cup match in St. Lucia, and he's got 2 50s in this series. So he loves playing against Australia. He showed glimpses of what he can do. And I was really impressed with his performance. And also from a bowling perspective, yes, the bowlers got smashed around, but Brad Curry took 5 wickets for the series. He took the early wickets for Scotland in games 2 and 3, where he got 3 for 37 in game 2, 2 for 20 in game 3. And, he showed glimpses of what he can do with the ball. So Scotland throughout the series, even though the scoreboard says 3-0 to Australia, at times in the series, Scotland showed their potential and what they can do. But they weren't able to execute it. And that's the thing that Scotland will look back on and say, you know what, we didn't quite execute our skills. And in T20 cricket, it's very important to do that. You've got to execute your skills, especially if you're an associate nation playing against a full member nation in Australia. You have to play 10 times your level. And Scotland have to play 10 times than they're already playing at the moment to try and beat Australia. And that's a very difficult thing. But what this series is about for Scotland, it's all about learning, reflecting, learning, getting better. The only way you will get better is to build experience, to be in a match situation, to learn under pressure against the world's best teams like Australia, as Scotland did in this series. It's very important to do that. And no doubt the experience and what they've gained from the series will definitely put them in good stead going forward. And it will definitely do that for Scotland. But as I said, they show glimpses, but, key opportunities. You can't afford to not capitalize on key opportunities. And that's what happened with Scotland. They weren't able to capitalize on key opportunities that were presented to them. They had key opportunities. They weren't able to grab those opportunities. And that's the disappointing factor for them. So plenty to learn from Scotland going forward. But the experience of playing against Australia will certainly put them in good stead going forward. They're a team that's on the rise. They're one of the best associate nations going around in the world at the moment, along with the Netherlands. Opportunities, they've got an opportunity to get better and better and hopefully one day probably beat Australia or beat a full member nation. They defeated the West Indies in the T20 World Cup in 2022. So, anything's possible. But just to finish up about Scotland's series overall, yeah, they'll be disappointed, but certainly all the players, the team embraced the series. They embraced playing against Australia. They talked about winning the game or winning the series early on before the series started. And that's good. You've got to have that sort of attitude. Yes, it didn't quite work out, didn't quite pan out the way they would have wanted, but definitely the learnings and the experience they gained will definitely put them in good stead going forward. So let's hope Scotland can use this to their advantage and hopefully get better in the years to come as a cricket side, because they are getting better. We saw that in the T20 World Cup, and this series against Australia was a great test for them, and hopefully they'll learn a lot from the series. Let's move on and talk about Australia's performance with bat and ball and how they performed as a team overall in the series. So let's have a look at the batting and bowling stats. We'll start with the batting stats. In terms of run scorers, Inglis 130, Green 98, Head 92, Mitchell Marsh 70, David 42, Stoinis 28, Fraser McGurk 16, Aaron Hardy 11, to wrap up the batting stats there for Australia. And then let's have a look at the bowling stats in terms of the wicket takers. 6 wickets for Green and Abbott, 5 wickets for Stoinis, 4 wickets for Zampa, 3 wickets each for Hardy and Bartlett, and a wicket for Meredith, and no wickets for Cooper Connolly, who made his debut in the last game of the series. So that's how Australia went about things with the bat and with the ball. And as expected, Australia very dominant in the series. A 3-0 series win was expected. I don't think anyone was surprised by that result, given the class and the quality of the Australian team compared to the Scotland team. But Australia will be pleased with the result. They've started their tour of Scotland and the UK on a positive note, and they'll be very delighted with how things panned out. So let's just have a talk about how they went about things across the 3 games. So in game number 1, Australia made light work of the run chase, all thanks to a superb innings from Travis Head, 80 of 25. They chased down Scotland's 154 in 9.4 overs. It just shows you, Travis Head had a day out. Mitchell Marsh scored runs as well. And also Australia produced the highest ever power play score in T20 internationals with 113, beating South Africa's 102 against the West Indies last year. So it just showed you that Australia were on track for a very quick run chase in game 1. Travis Head, as I mentioned, batted superbly, showed what he can do. Not surprising at the least for Travis Head. Not surprising to see him bat the way he does. He's a very attacking, aggressive player, and he showed that. Also recorded the equal fastest 50 in T20s for Australia, 17 balls to equal the record that Marcus Stoinis set in the 2022 T20 World Cup when Australia played Sri Lanka, and that was in Perth during that World Cup in Australia. As I mentioned, Mitchell Marsh batted well in game 1, 39 off 12, and the Australian bowlers bowled pretty well in game 1. And obviously this Australian attack doesn't have Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood. It's quite an inexperienced attack for some of them when it comes to international cricket, but they were able to adjust to the conditions. They went for some runs early on, but adjusted, and everyone took wickets and contributed, and they did pretty well. Sean Abbott took 3 wickets. Bartlett, Zampa took 2 in the first game. Green and Meredith took 1 each. Marcus Stoinis only bowled 2 overs and didn't take a wicket, but was very effective. So that's how game 1 went about their business, Australia, in game 1. And also Jake Fraser-McGurk made his T20 debut in game 1, got out for a duck, which he will be disappointed about on debut. So that's pretty much how Australia went about things in game 1. Game 2 was pretty much the same as game 1, dominant again. This time Australia were batting first, and 4 for 196 proved to be too much for Scotland. It was a pretty good innings that we saw from Josh Inglis. Not a surprise to see him playing the way he does. He's done pretty well in the Big Bash for the Perth Scorchers for some time. He scored a fantastic 100 to follow Travis Head's superb innings from game 1. Top scored with 103 or 49, promoted up to number 3 in game number 2 after Mitchell Marsh changed the order around, and Mitchell Marsh decided to promote Josh Inglis up to number 3, give him an opportunity, and that was a really good opportunity for Josh Inglis, which he made the most of. He also smashed the fastest T20 International 100 for Australia, 43 balls, beating Aaron Finch's record of 47, which he got against England in 2013 when Aaron Finch went on to score that 156 in Southampton. And also Australia lost Travis Head and Fraser McGurk early in the innings to be 2 for 23, but then a good partnership from Inglis and Green rescued Australia, 92 for the 3rd wicket, to get Australia back on track to post that 196 score. The Australian bowlers, just like in game 1, bowled well. Marcus Stoinis was the pick of the bowlers with 4 for 23, and they were able to bowl Scotland out for 126 in the run chase, and were able to win game 2 by 70 runs. And then in the last game, the 3rd and final game, where they won by 6 wickets, Australia, they made light work of the run chase. They chased down 149 with ease, Cameron Green was the standout, 62 not out for him of 39. Scotland's bowlers were smashed around the park again, and the Australian bowlers did well and did the job again like they did in Game 1 and Game 2. So that's pretty much how Australia went about their business across the 3 games. And I think Mitchell Marsh and co will be very delighted with how things went. I think Mitchell Marsh will be delighted. I think Australia will be happy. They got what they wanted from the series. And that was pretty much to win the series, but also to carry on the momentum going into the England T20 series, which will follow this tour of Scotland. Australia will play 3 T20s, 5 ODIs against England to end their tour of the UK and Scotland. So I think what I mentioned before is that I think Marsh and Andrew McDonald will be happy. I think Australia got what they wanted from the series. Certain batters scored runs. Josh Inglis, Green, Head and Marsh, as an example, scored runs. And that's what Australia wanted, to give opportunities. And that's what they did. The bowling group took wickets. It was a new look bowling attack for Australia. Even though it's not experienced in international cricket, they do have experience when it comes to T20 cricket, playing domestic leagues around the world like the IPL and also the BBL. So I don't think there's any difference from making the step up from domestic T20s to international T20s. It's pretty much the same format, and the skills are very transferable. And the bowling attack did pretty well. Obviously, no Cummins, no Hazelwood, no Stark. They did a pretty good job, and they were very impressive throughout the series. So this new look Australian T20 team did the job. Mitchell Marsh talked about, starting this tour well, making sure that this young group gets experience and exposure. And that's certainly what they've done across the 3 games against Scotland, and also taking the opportunities when they come as well. And very impressive, Australia, as expected. All the players embraced playing the series against Scotland. They also embraced the atmosphere and the environment with the crowd as well. We saw a few times where the Australian fielders had a bit of banter with the Scotland crowd. A couple of fielders had some misfields and some drop catches, and the crowd let them know about it, which is all in good fun, I suppose. And that's what the atmosphere was like. It was great, and certainly the Australian players embraced it. But yeah, Australia will be very pleased about how they went about their business in this series against Scotland. Hopefully this momentum can carry on to the T20 series against England, which starts this week. And hopefully they can carry on that momentum and hopefully make it another T20 series win when they go over the border from Scotland to England to win that series. But just to finish up about Australia, very dominant, very strong. They'll be pleased about their performance in this series. Certain players will be happy about how they performed in the series. I think Jake Fraser-McGurk will be disappointed. He got out for a couple of ducks in this T20 series. But early days for Jake Fraser-McGurk. He's on debut in T20 cricket. He made his debut in the first game, I should say. So early days in his career, he'll definitely learn. He's in his early 20s. Australia were pretty good with bat and ball. The fielding was superb. We saw some outstanding catches throughout the series. We saw Travis Head took a superb one-handed catch. I think it was in game 2. And then we saw some good outfielding catching as well from Tim David and Jake Fraser-McGurk at times. So, yeah, I think Australia will be very pleased with how they performed in all disciplines with the bat, ball in the field. And I think they'll be very happy with this series result and thoroughly enjoyed their time playing cricket in Scotland and also playing Scotland, who they don't play very often. And they certainly performed very well throughout the series. So for Australia, bigger fish to fry with England, of course, in the T20 series, which begins very shortly. Hopefully, they'll be looking to carry on this momentum from Scotland into the T20 series against England. Some concluding thoughts and final thoughts from this T20 series between Scotland and Australia to finish off our T20 Series review episode of Scotland and Australia. I thought this series between Scotland and Australia was a great series. I think a lot of people will say it was 3-0. It was a bit one-sided. Australia were dominant. That was clear to see before the series started. But what I mean by a great series is that the atmosphere, and I'm talking about the crowd, I'm talking about the atmosphere of the crowd, how the players from both sides interacted with the crowd, how the crowd got involved in this series over the 3 games. And the Grange ground in Edinburgh, a lot of people made comments about the ground in Grange, that it's quite small. Is it fit for international cricket? Well, I think that's what you're going to get in the associate world. Now, a lot of people who don't watch associate cricket or don't follow associate cricket all that much and just mainly focus on mainstream cricket, which is the majority of the cricketing viewership, really, especially from people of 4-member countries. This is what associate cricket has to work with. Of course, you're going to have some grounds that are small. They're not the multi-purpose stadiums that we have in Australia. It's not 100,000 capacity, but it's something different. And we saw the Australian players embrace that because they're used to playing in front of big crowds. And when you play at stadiums or when you play at grounds like this in Grange in Edinburgh, it's a different atmosphere. It makes it more enjoyable. And it was great to see. And that's what I loved about the series. It was great to see children and kids there embracing cricket, supporting Scotland, of course, but they also got to see Australia up close and see how the world's best players go about it from Australia. And they were entertained. Travis Head, Josh Inglis in particular, Mitchell Marsh with the bat, even with the bowling side of things. It was fantastic. It was fantastic to see all that. And it just reiterates that, cricket in Scotland is growing. Obviously, other sports are quite popular in Scotland. You've got football, you've got rugby, etc. But cricket is definitely growing and developing, and it's great to see people supporting Scottish cricket when they can. And that's the whole point of the series. Cricket Scotland, definitely the big winners from this, even though they didn't win the series, Scotland, but Cricket Scotland in general, where Australia were meant to tour Ireland for a few T20s and ODIs. Cricket Ireland said to Cricket Australia, we couldn't do it because it's too much financially. So we had to cancel the series and the tour. Cricket Scotland took the mantle up and said, hey, we'll do it. We see this as a big opportunity, and it's definitely a big win for Cricket Scotland, no doubt. And I think they'll be pleased with how the series went, even though the home side didn't win. But more importantly, we saw good crowds. It was a good environment, friendly atmosphere. What more could you ask for? Australia were too strong. That was evident in the result of the series. 3-0 is a convincing result, as expected. And they played pretty well, Australia, dominated in all facets of the game. For Scotland, they showed glimpses of what they can do when they're at their best. And throughout the series, we saw that with bat and ball. We saw certain players show what they are capable of. It's just that Scotland overall missed key opportunities with the bat and with the ball, and they weren't able to capitalize on that. And when you play against the top-ranked teams in the world, you've got to win key moments. You can't make mistakes or errors, otherwise you're going to pay. And you have to play a level above that you're already capable of. And for Scotland, there's still a long way to go. But as I said earlier, and keep saying, the more experience, the more exposure they get playing top-ranked teams, the more better they will be. And the only way to get better at something, whenever you're doing something that you want to try and get better at, it's all about gaining experience, doing it firsthand, but also learning from each time you do it. How are you going to get better? Yes, you will never perfect. No one will never perfect the game of cricket. There's no such thing as perfection in any walk of life. There's no such thing as perfection. But if you have a growth mindset, an open mind, curious mind, looking at ways to get better, then you are going to get better as a cricket team. And no doubt for Scotland, that's what they should be doing. when they reflect on this series against Australia. And look at how Australia go about things. How does Travis Head go about his batting when he went off? Same with Josh Inglis. How do the Australian bowlers go about things in a different situation in the game? So no doubt Scotland will do that and will definitely benefit that as a cricket side going forward. So Australia, this tour of Scotland is completed. They've set out what they wanted to do, and that was to win the series. They've ticked that off. Mitchell Marsh said, we wanted to win this series 3-0, and they did. Now Australia go over the border to England and play England, the old enemy, in 3 T20s. The first one starting on Thursday the 12th. And Australia will be looking to carry on the momentum from the T20 series against Scotland, hoping to beat England in that T20 series, and then followed by 5 ODIs after that. So Australia definitely looking to really have a successful tour of the UK on that part of their tour after a very dominant first part of the tour in Scotland. And last but not least, just to finish up, the last point, let's hope we see Scotland and Australia play more games against each other. Not only in T20 cricket, but let's hope we see them play an ODI series in the future as well. I think both teams embrace playing against each other. I think the relationship between the both countries will definitely grow and strengthen after this. And it's an opportunity for both teams to hopefully play a lot more cricket against each other. Not only Scotland and Australia, but also it sends a message to the other 4 member nations as well. If they play a lot more with the associate nations, the more opportunities the associate nations will have to grow and develop and get better as a cricket team and as a cricket country can only benefit the world game. It can grow cricket, it can make it stronger. And cricket's a global sport, and everyone's a part of this great family and great game of cricket. So hopefully we see a lot more of Scotland and Australia in the future. And hopefully one day we'll see Scotland tour Australia. Who knows? Hopefully that is the case. But definitely both teams will be certainly hoping for more cricket in the future. Thanks everyone for listening to our T20 series T20 series review, I should say, between Scotland and Australia. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this T20 series between Scotland and Australia in the comments. We'll love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.